Hello, hello. Yes, I know I'm about 5 or 6 minutes late. This is one of the reasons I would say is because the monk is a class that I am way too invested in and have way too much that I would like to say about it. It's going to be an interesting discussion. I'll tell you that now. Anyway, I have a poll which I'll put up, and you can feel free to take part in that poll. I'm going to try to do this as quickly as I can, but because it is the monk, for those of you who know, I really like the monk a lot, and so it's going to be hard for me to keep this short. I don't think that's necessarily going to be the. There's so much to say. Like, there's a lot to say about the monk. So grab some food, some drink, make sure you're comfortable, and I'm going to get into this. Okay, I do have access to the rules for the 2024 monk at my disposal, so we'll be using that. Anyway, let's get moving. Hi, welcome to How to RPG. My name is Fred Wheeler, and today I want to talk about a tabletop role-playing game, Dungeons and Dragons, and it's not Dungeons and Dragons 5e for me. Frankly, I think we're dealing with a different animal. This is the monk for 2024. Now, they've said that it is backward compatible, and they've also said that it's still 5e. Some people are referring it to 5.5, but I'll make it clear that there's so many changes that there are more changes going from, there are more changes than what was going on from version 3 to 3.5. This is a 6e, okay? They just might not coin it that way. It is 6e. And if you've played enough different versions of the game, you'll start to see that there is a pattern. They just don't want to lose their money. And there's nothing wrong with saying it's a new edition. Whatever plan they have, maybe it will work, maybe it won't. There are a couple of things, though, I would like to make really clear before I start, and I'll make this fast, so I won't make you wait too long. I am way too invested in the monk. I really like the monk a lot, and as a result of that, whatever I have to say is probably going to be, there'll be some good stuff, and I'm going to be very critical too, because I've been involved in the martial arts for years, and I stopped when I got kind of a bit too old to do it anymore, and I've also loved the monk, also the wizard, but the monk has already been something that I've got way too attached to. The fantasy behind the monk has been a big factor for me, and so it's very hard for me to dissect some of that and be a bit more rational about the whole process, because there's so much that I want to do with the monk, So I also want to make it clear that I don't support Wizards of the Coast, the company. Just because I'm talking about Dungeons and Dragons 2024 or the monk, I don't support that company anymore. I don't buy their products. I don't really support their products as such. I'm not suggesting by doing this that you should go out and buy whatever it is so you can get the new monk. I honestly couldn't care less. It's up to you, okay? And the reason is their business practices. I've said this, the quality of their products are not very good, frankly, and this is one of the reasons that's made my decision. It's not just the open game license debacle of last year. There are other things tied up to this. It continues on, but my patrons always like me to talk about certain things, and I have a lot of patrons who have wanted me to talk about the monk, and they know that I like talking about the monk. And so I have a patron who's given me access to D&D Beyond, so I can use the Digital Player's Handbook for 2024. So I didn't pay for anything, okay? And I'm going to try to present my opinion as honest as I possibly can. I think it's going to be a bit hard when it's a monk. It's hard for me to be, to not get too sort of attached to things. And because there are people who watch my channel who still play D&D 5e, and I have patrons who still play D&D 5e, and will probably want to play the new D&D 6e in 2024, I'm going to cover it, okay? I play characters more than I dungeon master, as I've said before, in my home group, and I am both a player and a game master in that group. I've only just started going back to game mastering or being a dungeon master. And also my entire group are made up of players and game masters. Everybody does every role. Like there's none of this one side or the other. So we have a very different perspective. If you think that there's a different perspective at a table between game master and player, I do not believe that is the case. So this is why I'll be looking at it from the perspective of player and game master. And I've also recently been playing a lot of D&D 5e, Modified D&D, Shadow Dark, Beck Me D&D, which is basic D&D, an older version. Other different tabletop role-playing games I've played older and newer stuff like Shadow Dark and Dagger Heart and Super Atomic and Mork Borg, Pirate Borg, Star Wars Saga, Fate, Mage Ascension, Sagas, Pathfinder, and other versions of D&D. So the monk. For me, the monk has generally been considered the weakest class. I never really agreed with that myself. And the view, I think, is particularly around the martial classes in combat. When you compared them to the martial classes in combat, the monk was often viewed as being the one that did the least amount of damage and was the least survivable. I've never really found that to be necessarily the case, but if you do the maths, it tends to work out that way, right? If you start putting in probabilities and damage output and so forth, it tends to look that way. I always thought that the monk was pretty good at surviving. It's a survivor. It really does. It does a good job. But it had almost no utility. Like there's almost no utility. And most of the martial classes suffer from this. So let's have a quick look at the actual class itself. And then I will sort of present my perspective on what I think is going on here with the monk. So going through here, the art is very different. We get a Dragonborn monk as our front art piece. I'm not against that. I like Dragonborn, so that's cool. I don't know why we have them sort of looking at the back of them rather than the front of them, but apparently that's how it works here. Most of the starting stuff is essentially the same. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail on this stuff. I'll come back to it. So the layout is very similar to what I was showing you when I was doing the wizard. And then what you will notice is they included the multi-class aspects. So if you want a multi-class, they've kind of given you how to start things, how to do things, and if you want a multi-class with the monk, you can. All right, so you'll notice as you go through here, most of this is generally the same. There are a few changes. What you will notice is the different things you get as a monk. The level progression is very stuffed. There's a lot of different stuff here, and the names of those features are different. There's quite a few things that got removed and replaced with something else. Some of that is good, some of that is bad. Martial arts still exists. You've still got unarmored defense. Monk focus is really the key that we used to have. It's just been relabeled, and the mechanics behind it is a little bit different. Unarmored movement, essentially in most ways, is completely identical. Something that's new is uncanny metabolism. Deflect attacks is a bit different. It's not exactly the same either. We've got our monk subclasses, and the four subclasses they focus on are warrior of mercy, warrior of shadow, warrior of elements, and a warrior of the open hand. And I think that's a reasonable sort of spread. It kind of hits all of the major marks for a monk. Maybe not all of them, but pretty close to. I think that it's a reasonable choice. Okay, and then you've got your slow fall, essentially the same. Extra attack, essentially the same. Stunning strike is quite different to what it was before, and powered strikes replaces something else we used to have. Evasion, essentially the same, although they've clarified, since some people don't read every part of the book when they pick up a monk. They've had to do a bit of clarification, so they don't have to deal with. Anyway, I'll get into that. We've got acrobatic movement, it's kind of like a new thing too, and not a new thing. It's essentially something that was there before that now is just relabeled. Heightened focus really plays into your focus points rather than key points. Your self-restoration is basically your ability to deal with stuff. It's kind of a renaming of something that was there before. Deflect energy is very new. That's not been there before generally. It's part of the base class. Discipline survivor, okay, kind of was there before. I think it's kind of a little more relabeled as anything else. Perfect focus is a new system or a new feature. I think it was from a higher. I think you got perfect focus at a higher level, and now you get it at a lower level. It just was called something else. Superior defense, epic boons, because every class gets them, and then we get body and mind, which is a rather outrageous capstone for the class. Now, I'm not going to go through all of the subclasses right now. What I want to do is I want to address some of the things that I noticed with this class. First off, you'll notice in the title I said that this thing is overpowered, and I think that ultimately the monk may have been viewed, much like the ranger, as one of the weakest classes in the game, and monk might have been right near the bottom. The only thing is that's not the case now. The monk is probably one of the strongest classes in the game. And it's quite clear the focus. Like, if you look at the development of Dungeons and Dragons version 3, 3.5, version 4, 5e, and now 6e, essentially, what you're looking at is a simulation game. And it's focused on combat simulation. Very much so. The monk is probably one of the most powerful classes out there, and it almost feels like for an optimizer it would be one of the most essential classes to play. So if you have a group or party with martial classes in it, you want to have a monk there. You probably will. It'll be like the paladin. Everybody had to have a paladin in the party, right? Now it's going to be the monk, just because the monk just seems to do everything a lot better. And the monk it falls into the strange sort of realm of being martial and spellcaster, but it's not a spellcaster. I know that sounds strange. It's not, I wouldn't say it's better than the wizard or spellcasters. What I would say is it's certainly up there that you would be better to have a monk rather than just have spellcasters. Trent Monk's talked about all of this, and I agree with him generally with regard to that aspect of it. Okay, so let's have a look at the things that I sort of noticed that I wanted to point out about the monk and where this is all going for me. I don't understand why the monk's primary ability is still just listed as dexterity and wisdom, which is what we had before. I guess that's fine, because strength should be a factor as well. But already the monk has to rely on 2 different abilities for, ability scores to determine how the mechanics of their monk works. And if you've ever been involved in the martial arts, and essentially the monk is just a martial artist, really, you'll know that there are those who focus more on dexterity and those who focus more on strength, depending on their body type. And, wisdom certainly comes into play, I guess. But ultimately, what you're looking at is a monk you should have to be able to build a monk that is dex-based or strength-based. And the game does not allow for that. And I think that was very odd. And it's still very much reliant. It's not just reliant on wisdom being a sort of a secondary skill. It's very much reliant on that for a lot of the things that you've got going on here. So that might be a little bit of a problem, if you ask me. I wonder why they have thought of that as let's continue that avenue. But I mean, it's been going on for a while, so I suppose, they didn't want to change it too much. But heck, they changed so much. I mean, some of those subclasses for the monk are almost unrecognizable. Okay, next, the monk's skills have not been changed. I don't understand why they didn't expand or make it more flexible, because a martial artist should be able to pick up other skills. A monk should be able to pick up other skills other than just the standard ones we had before. So I think that was a lost opportunity. But you haven't lost anything. They just haven't changed anything. Simple weapons and martial weapons that have the light property. So these are the things you're proficient with now as a monk. So you get simple weapons, okay. And then you get martial weapons that have the light property. And those are now things that monks are trained and proficient with. It's all right. It's pretty tidy. It certainly takes up less space. But I think also too that maybe the designers have misunderstood the concept of the monk and the martial artist, because it was quite common for the polearm to be used by the martial artist. Not just the spear. The spear was certainly a favorite weapon. Yeah. If you're going to pick up a weapon, a spear. But if you didn't have a spear, then it would definitely be the quarterstaff, just basically a long stick, really, that's reinforced. And of course, the rice flail, which is the nunchuck, because they're cheap, they're easy to find. You can break off and make yourself a quarterstaff from a broom or any kind of garden implement. So, but the polearm was also a big factor too, and they have not allowed that, which I think kind of steals from the narrative of the martial artist and monk a little bit. I guess you can't have them, you can't give them everything, I guess. But it's weird to think that there's so much of the polearm and yet we don't get anything in this class at all. You do get more starting equipment. You get a bit more. You get a tool, like you get a tool. You don't just get tool proficiency, you get a tool. But the weapons selected are really restrictive. Like, you don't have a lot of choice if you're using starting gear. You're probably better off to go and buy what you want, because you're going to get a spear and daggers. I mean, spear's fine. I mean, it was certainly a common weapon, but why does it have to be the spear? Probably because I've decided that is the most optimal way to go. You can throw it, you can use it in melee. Okay. Daggers rather than darts, probably because you can throw daggers and daggers are probably going to do more damage. So, okay. But yeah, it's very restrictive to starting gear, so you're probably better off to go and just buy what you want so you get exactly what you're after. The next thing I'm going to say is your martial arts die finally has been adjusted. It used to be a D4 when you started out, and then it would progress, and I think the top end was a D10. Okay? And this is a great idea. They've gone from a D6 to a D12 now. So you start at D6, a 6-sided dice, and finally, your final progression, you're going to get a D12. Okay? Somewhere around, I think it's level 17 or roughly like that, somewhere around there. Smart move. It probably should have been done. It's a great idea. Okay, I am all for doing that. I have no problems with that whatsoever. What I do have to mention is that there is an unarmed fighting style feat that you can get at low level that kind of steps on the toes of the monk, which allows you to roll, when you make an unarmed strike, you can have a D6. Now, it doesn't progress like a monk, okay? But this one feat essentially puts you on par, since you might well get it quite early. There'll be ways it'll happen. If you get this unarmed fighting style feat, you're essentially as good, in most cases, as fighting as a monk. Now, given that the monk can, with its martial arts, can make 2 attacks with an action, and you won't be doing that, because I don't believe that unarmed strikes are viewed as 2-weapon fighting in the current version of D&D 2024. But yeah, I'm not particularly fond of that unarmed fighting style, although at least it's not exactly the same as the monk's martial arts feature. I don't really care that key points are now called focus points. I've never really been too concerned about that, whether they're called chi or key or focus points or discipline points. And the reason being ultimately is because I wanted them to be completely removed from the game. I think that having a resource management thing like key points, chi points, focus points, which is what we have now, focus points, is a mistake. It will always lead to how do you spend them and fighting for resources to do things with the monk. And if, as I go through here, it'll be quite clear and obvious that the monk, even though it is not quite as reliant on using its key points or focus points, it is still very much about using focus points. And that, I mean, I know at higher levels it won't matter too much, but I think that was a mistake. I think what they were better off to do is to figure out what do we want the monk to be able to achieve in one round, and just build around that, and they haven't done that. So I can see there being a lot of complexity to a monk. It's going to be quite hard to play. And it's also going to be fighting for resources, and it's those focus points now. A monk can now make an unarmed strike as a bonus action. Okay, so which annoys me. I mean, I I don't like bonus actions. I'll be clear. I don't like bonus actions being still in the game. But it's now really important action economy. Like there are so many things that are bonus actions for a monk. You've got things that are an action, then you've got things that are a bonus action. And almost all of the monk's features and things that they can do are bonus actions. So you're not just dealing with focus points, you're dealing with competing with bonus action things as well. Not everything is an action though. There are a few things that the monk have that are not a bonus action or an action. You can just do them as part of whatever. Okay, but we'll get to that. A monk can now sort of grapple or shove, has been listed. You can initiate it with your dexterity, which in my opinion should have been a standard rule for every class anyway. Like rather than, okay, you have to use strength, so now you can use, if you're going to grapple or shove, you can use your dexterity rather than the strength athletics check, which is not really what you're doing now, because what you're looking at is more of an attack roll. Unfortunately, the grapple rules, when I looked at them, the grapple rules are much more complicated than they were before. They're scattered all over the place. And now it's a mix of attack roll and saving throw. Like Wizards of the Coast, you need to decide where you want to go with this. I honestly think that you should have decided to just either stick with the attack roll, but if you felt like the attack roll was a problem and you don't want to do that because of armor class, then stick with it's a saving throw. So you try to perform a grapple or a shove, and you have the other character, the monster or the other character or whoever the opponent is, make a saving throw. Cool. If they fail, they're grappled. If they succeed, no grapple or shove. And then if they want to escape later on, they make another saving throw. Just stick to one dice mechanic. And this is not really a complaint of the monk. This is more a complaint of the shove and the grapple rules, which are unnecessarily complicated now and confusing. And I have no desire to explain them or demonstrate them in a video ever, frankly. Next. Flurry of Blows is basically the same, still requires a focus point, which is a limited resource, and it involves a bonus action. And I think really they need to just ditch the bonus action and the focus point. That would have been my preference. Just make Flurry of Blows is just basically extra attack. So just have it stagger it. You could have, instead of calling it extra attack, just call it Flurry of Blows. Get rid of the focus point. Treat Flurry of Blows like your fighter's extra attack. Figure out how many attacks you want your monk to have in a turn at whatever level, and or round, should I say, in a turn or round, and then just build it around that. And we're still dealing with bonus actions and focus points, and I'm not happy about that very much at all. I think that was unnecessary, and complicated. Patient Defense and Step of the Wind have an option that uses no focus point now, which is good idea. Like, happy to see that. But it's a bonus action. It's a bonus action, as I said, and there's also an option to do more when you use a focus point. So if you use a focus point, you can do a bit more than you could do before. Now, I'm not going to go into the specifics of that because I don't think that's quite as interesting. I think they were on the right track with what they were trying to do with, eliminating the use of a focus point for Patient Defense and Step of the Wind. What I think Patient Defense, disengage. Okay, great. No focus point. But ditch the bonus action. Just say that you can do Patient Defense or Step of the Wind once per round, or once per turn, or something like that. Probably once per round is probably a better idea, okay? And it's part of the movement action or something like that. That would have been my choice. But now we have, Patient Defense. If you want to use it, your alternative, you can spend that focus point. Instead of just disengaging as a bonus action, you can take both the disengage and dodge action as a bonus action. But why? Why would you worry about that? If you If you're going to dodge, then dodge. If you're going to disengage, disengage. So I don't understand why they did this. Now, Step of the Wind, if you spend a focus point, you can both disengage and dash as a bonus action. So really, this is the escape. Like, which one is the most sensible to use? I've always said before, it is almost always better to dodge than to disengage. And even if you dash and move away further than you did before, with your, is it? I mean, you can move further and you can dodge. Is that what we're talking about? No. You can move further with Step of the Wind. You can move further and you'll be disengaging. Doesn't mean somebody won't just run up to you and do everything over again, unless, of course, your movement is significantly higher. And you're a monk, so you probably will. But yes, I don't know that I particularly like this. I think it's overly complicated, but it's certainly better than it was before in 2014. Okay. Next, we get to Uncanny Metabolism, which didn't exist before at level 2. So we're only dealing with a lot of stuff that's just like level 1 stuff. Like that was, we haven't even got very far. But yes, level 2 monk focus, and now we're on to another level 2 feature. So they've still front-loaded the class way too much, which means that it's too easy to multi-class and take dips, which I don't think you'll wind up dipping into monk that way. I don't think you're going to take 2 dips of monk and then do something else. I don't think that's very likely. But Uncanny Metabolism. So all of your focus points, you get them back when you roll initiative. Okay, and you regain hit points once before taking a long rest. Like, you know, temporary hit points seem to be the new catchphrase for almost all the classes. I don't know why we needed to do that, you know, and the number of temporary hit points you get back is not really the biggest factor, I would say. Like, you know, rolling your martial arts die and then regaining a number of hit points equal to your monk level plus the number rolled. Temporary hit points just drag on a battle. And I have seen monks go down, but honestly, they've got so many features, not necessarily at low level, that keep them alive, and they're usually fine. Getting all of your focus points back when you roll initiative essentially means that the plan is that whatever you do when you're playing a monk is that you expend all your focus points for that one battle. And then when you roll initiative again for a new battle, then you will get all of your focus points back. So the idea is you blow them all in one battle. That's what Uncanny Metabolism tells me. I mean, it does say that you can't use this again until you take a long rest. But I mean, what's going to happen is you're going to blow it. They're all gone. Okay. You're going to. That's your first battle, and then your second battle comes along, and then Uncanny Metabolism will kick in. You'll use your roll of initiative. You'll get them all back. You'll get 2 attacks, and then you won't want to take a short rest, and you won't want to continue on. Instead, you take the long rest, and voila. So that's two battles where you've used all of your focus points. I'm not sure that that's a smart way to build a character. This is why I don't want to have focus points at all. Anyway, next, deflect attacks at level 3 now includes melee attacks. So it's not just ranged attacks, it's also melee. And it scales with your monk level. So it will automatically get spammed. You know, if I was playing this or somebody else is playing it, they're going to spam deflect attacks and try to use it as much as possible. I think this should have been linked to the dodge action rather than it being a reaction every single round, because that's essentially what it is now. If you take the dodge action, you can deflect melee and ranged attacks. That would have been the smart thing to do, rather than have it be some way of reducing damage every single time you have a reaction available to you. Not a huge fan of it, but it's certainly far stronger and better than it was before. I mean, I'll give you that. But yeah, there's so much. It's like everything that the monk does, like its action, its movement, its bonus action, and its reaction has been powered up. Like there's every part of the game, you know, in terms of action economy, has been powered up. Slow fall and extra attack are the same. They're fine. I never had any problems with them. They were right the way they are. Like I say, link extra attack into the flurry of blows and just call it that and be done with it. Next, Stunning Strike at level 5 has been restricted to once per turn. So you used to be able to supernova with Stunning Strike. So if you missed, you just do it again, and you just keep using up your key points, or now focus points, until you finally manage to stun the big monster, which is what you would try to do as a monk. It's like, okay, I can stun the monster. Once it's stunned, everybody's going to wail on it, and we'll take it down. And you're more likely to have quite a high initiative or dexterity modifier because you are a monk, because you needed to have dex, right? The duration to the Stunning Strike has also changed. It's not as long as it used to be. Now it's the start of your next turn rather than the end of your next turn. When I really think it should have been, instead of turn, it should have said round. Otherwise, you will still be able to use Stunning Strike as an opportunity attack, as far as I can see from what the rules say. You can Stunning Strike with thrown weapons, not just a melee weapon, which I was like, okay, sure, why not? So you're not punching and kicking them, you are throwing a weapon, and you manage to Stunning Strike them. That's certainly better than it was before. I don't know that I understand the narrative behind that. Even if a creature succeeds on the saving throw, though, with the Stunning Strike, even if they succeed and they don't get stunned, they are still going to be affected by the Stunning Strike. So, failure, you stun them, great, awesome. They succeed, they're still kind of buggered because their speed is halved and the next attack against them has advantage. I mean, it's certainly a major nerf, but, for the nerf that they've done, there's a sort of a weird sort of link to this. Like, how does that work? Stunning Strike stunned you, and it never changed your speed. Like, if you were stunned, it didn't change your speed. I don't quite understand why the secondary effect doesn't feel like it sort of fits in line with what's going on. I know the idea is the complaint was always that Stunning Strike, if you fail to succeed with Stunning Strike, it was like a nothing burger. Okay? But there's plenty of spells out there that are nothing burgers as well. Okay? It fails to work, you do nothing. There are plenty of spells out there that also work, you do half damage or something like that. I think with the Stunning Strike, it would have been, if you're going to restrict it to once per turn, then make it so that it falls in line with the concept of the stun condition. And the secondary effects when they succeed don't fall in line with the stun condition at all. Anyway, there's so many other things you can do as a monk. You don't need to really worry too much about Stunning Strike, honestly. I mean, it's great. It will work and it will do what you want it to do. But apparently you can Stunning Strike literally anything. I'm going to go and Stunning Strike a god or a great huge ancient dragon. Why not? And it works. Yeah, I know where their chakra points are. And powered strikes at level 6 have unarmed strikes do force damage. Now, in powered strikes at level 6 doing force damage, rather than counting as a magic item, because it's basically renamed, right? I think it was called Key Empowered Strikes or something like that. I can't remember exactly. I mean, force damage, you almost never see a monster that has immunity to force damage or resistance to force damage. But my concern with that is I feel like we are at least losing something from the class by doing that. I don't even know what is the point of doing that? Was it even necessary? Was it really that necessary? Were we fine to just leave it where it was? I think it was an unnecessary change. There'll be somebody who'll point out force damage is always better than having a magic weapon. And then somebody else will say, no, magic weapon and having a strike that doesn't, magic damage is better than force damage. Okay, all right. Anyway, next, evasion at level 7 is the same, except you have included the damage reduction doesn't work if the monk is incapacitated, which I thought was amusing because that sentence wasn't there before. And I think the reason that line is there is not to clear up and make it obvious that, if you're incapacitated, you can't use evasion. if you look at the incapacitated condition and you read that part of the rules, which is somewhere else, it should be bloomin' obvious that you cannot use evasion if you are incapacitated. If you are incapacitated, you cannot dodge around. Okay, it says it in the thing. But clearly, I think the design team got so many questions on this evasion at level 7 for the monk that they got sick and tired and thought, well, we're going to add in an extra sentence just so it is spelled out for the rules lawyers and the people who don't go and look and read the back of the book where the conditions are, how the thing works. I think it's highly amusing that that's actually taking place right now. It actually makes me weep to think those poor buggers had to contend with so many people who did not seem to understand that all they needed to do is just read the conditions and read what incapacitated mean, and you didn't need to have that sentence in there. But it's there. It's not a bad thing. It will certainly solve a lot of their headaches. Next. Acrobatic movement at level 9. The monk moves along vertical surfaces and across liquids without falling. We had something kind of like that before, I'm pretty sure. I don't know why we didn't just include climbing upside down. Like, just give them spider climb. Just be done. Running along surfaces, I never really cared very much for. And they say liquids, so does that mean you can run across liquid water or liquid molten rock or liquid metal? I mean, what are we dealing with here? And I know where this comes from. There's the mythology, and a lot of people have said there are masters out there, monks and martial artists who can literally move so fast they don't break the water tension at all, and they can run across water like Jesus Christ. They should really call it the Jesus Christ feature. It's not a bad feature, it kind of falls in line with it. But yeah, why not just let them climb upside down as well? Just be done with it. As a level 9 feature, I feel like that acrobatic movement is probably not a level 9 feature. I feel like it's a higher level feature. Mobility is always much better than damage dealing in high level. So they could have moved that to a higher level and it would have been fine there. And move some of the things that do damage to a lower level, because they're really, level 1 to 10 is a different game to level 11 to 20. Next, heightened focus at level 10 scales the flurry of blows. So you get like 3 attacks. You've got patient defense grants temporary hit points. Oh, hang on. We had another thing that did that too, didn't we? Step of the Wind gives you a very complex, exploitable and confusing mess of game mechanics. And I suppose I should explain what I mean a little bit about heightened focus. So we'll just take a little bit of a deep dive into heightened focus. So flurry of blows. You expend your focus point, you use your flurry of blows, and you get 3 attacks rather than 2 attacks. Okay, and that's at level 10. Fine, I have no problem with that. It's suitable for a level 10 feature. If you use patient defense, when you expend your focus point and use your patient defense, you gain a number of temporary hit points equal to 2 rolls. Not just 1 roll, but 2 rolls of your martial arts die. I'm not a fan of temporary hit points for monsters or player characters because it always drags out combat and makes it longer. So welcome to the world of 2 or 3 hours, maybe even 4 hours of one battle as you try to figure out all your numbers. Good luck. I played that in 4E. I'm not going back. Step of the Wind. This is the worst offender in my opinion. Let me read this out and see if you can fathom what's going on and see where there's going to be a lot of problems and confusion. Step of the Wind, part of the level 10 heightened focus feature. When you expend a focus point to use Step of the Wind, you can choose a willing creature within 5 feet of yourself that is large or smaller. Okay, so that means that covers pretty much everybody in your party. You're all good. Okay, you're not going to find anybody who's larger than large size. You're going to be large, medium, small, whatever. What you can do, you move that creature, your ally, with you until the end of your turn. And of course, you have a huge amount of movement. It is literally like Quicksilver from the X-Men in one of the movies that they had a couple of years back, where you grab somebody and you move them at super speed through the mansion. It's literally like that. And if you do that with a spellcaster and they have an aura, you can move that aura around really quickly. So you can see there's a whole lot of things it can be used to. You could literally, you could literally do this and potentially use it with multiple individuals. There's so many questions and so many sort of things that will crop up at tables. This Step of the Wind heightened focus is going to cause a lot of arguments between game master, dungeon master, and player. The creature's movement doesn't provoke attacks of opportunity. So as you move them out of battle, they are not going to get attacked. Yeah, that's exactly right. Did you notice too that when you use this feature, Step of the Wind, this part of it isn't like another action. It's just tied to whatever your normal Step of the Wind thing was, which is a bonus action. So it's not an extra thing. It's just going to be connected to that in some way, which kind of makes sense. But you can see that you're going to be able to move your whole, portions of your party, maybe your entire party around really, really fast. Imagine if you have more than one monk. It is a frightening thought just to think about just how fast everything is going to be flying around the battlefield. It's a terrible idea. And it will cause too many problems, in my opinion. Is it a really good feature? Absolutely. Yeah, you can exploit the snot out of that, for sure. Self-restoration at level 10. You can remove one condition and it's no action. Like, it doesn't cost you an action, a bonus action, a reaction, nothing like that. Which I think makes sense, honestly. And you can get rid of the charmed, frightened, or poisoned condition. It's better than it used to be. It used to be called something else, I think, and now it's this. And I think you got charmed and frightened, but now we have poisoned as well. It's a good idea. I don't have a problem with it so much, really. It kind of fits, I guess, in line a little bit with what the monk does. But there's no narrative. You'll notice with all the features in the new D&D 2024 Player's Handbook, the narrative has been completely removed. It's just game mechanics. That's it. I guess I had to make space for everything. Next, deflect energy at level 13 now allows deflect attack to reduce damage types, all damage types, not just one damage type. And the language benefit that you used to get at that level has been completely replaced. There's nothing. It's really only about avoiding damage in combat at level 13. That's not really the game that you play at level 13. If you've played level 13, it's a different game. And this is a feature which would be better suited earlier. And I don't mean like level 1, 2, or 3. I mean, probably between level 7 and 10 somewhere. It's even level 9. Push that to there and move the other feature I was talking about. That was a level 9 feature. The acrobatic movement. That should have been really a level 13 feature, in my opinion. That's much more suitable for there. I think the getting rid of the language benefits, which was confusing because when you read it, like, what the heck is going on here? It has eliminated a good chunk of the role-playing game aspect of a monk. The monk had so little utility as it was. At least it had something here, right? And now it's gone. I would have preferred them to just give it telepathy and be done with it. You now have telepathic communication with people. Wonderful. That falls in line with the narrative and the mythology of the monk and the martial artist. Absolutely, I can see that. Disciplined Survivor at level 14 is the same as the old Diamond Soul. Perfect Focus at level 15, when you roll initiative and don't use uncanny metabolism, gives you focus points. You get up to 4 focus points if you have less than 3 or less focus points. It's a terrible feature in every single way, in my opinion. I think Perfect Focus could easily be ditched because, at level 15, you're getting it at level 15. How many focus points do you have at level 15? And let's assume that you're probably only ever going to do 2 fights and then you're done. Level 15, you've got 15 focus points. Are you literally going to spend 7 focus points for every single battle? I suppose you could, because there's so many things that use focus points, right? Focus, flurry of blows, focus, stunning strike, focus. I mean, there's plenty of things that are there that you could use it with, I guess. But I think the level 15 feature is awful, in my opinion. And it's mechanically, combat-wise, and narratively, and no utility, and not even suitable, frankly, for a high-level monk. Like, high-level features should look different. Next, superior defense at level 18 grants resistance to all damage except for force if you spend 3 force points. Or should I say, not force, focus points. I'm saying force points now. You think I'd be playing Star Wars Saga. No, I'm not. 3 focus points. That's a lot of points to spend, but you are getting resistance to all damage except force. Only problem. This is a level 18 feature. Doesn't the low-level barbarian feature for the totem warrior give you this? Like at level 3? Isn't like the subclass, the first subclass feature you get for the barbarian totem warrior, the one of the bear one, give you damage resistance to all damage except psychic? This has removed force, but core blimey, I think they have misunderstood what you need at high level. This might have been a bit more useful a little bit earlier on. Level 18, it's not a bad feature, but it's not a level 18 feature. You needed that sooner rather than later. Anyway, this is where you take that feature and you attach it to a monk that is built around strength rather than dexterity. That would make more sense. Okay, if your primary and largest ability score is strength, not dexterity, then you get resistance. That would be a feature that you would connect to that in some way. I don't like this very much, not for level 18. Epic Boons at level 19 gets the monk a high level feat, okay, and they suggest Boon of Irresistible Offense. It's a reasonable feature for a mid-level combat feature, okay? If you look at how Irresistible Offense works, it would be fine if you were getting it between level 6 or 7 to 10, okay? But it's not really an epic feature, in my opinion, not for level 19. So I think they're going in the wrong direction with this. Next, the Capstone. Now, the Capstone, kind of crazy. If you remember what the Capstone was before, you're going to forget about it after you hear this. Body and Mind at level 20 gives you a bonus of +4 to your dexterity and your wisdom. That's 2 ability scores, and they're generally your primary ability scores. And of course, there's another little part to that, and that it kind of breaks the rule of you can no longer have anything higher than a 20, because it also says you can have up to a maximum of 25. So if you've already maxed out those particular ability scores to 20, well, now you can push them above 20, potentially to 25. Well, it's probably going to be more like 24. And then if you've got something else that can boost it again, then you get to 25. So it changes your maximum for those, for both your dexterity and your wisdom. Now, the Barbarian did this, but it only did it with 1. And the monk gets 2 of all things. Not 1, but 2. Okay, all right. Sheesh. Blimey. So what do I think of a feature? It's definitely much better than the high-level feature the monk used to have. Okay? But it's just increasing numbers. It's not really narratively exciting. Mechanically, it will feed into, a stealth check or perception checks. It'll feed into combat, your defenses. It will feed a lot of different things, but it's mostly combat. I'm not really fond of let's give you bigger numbers as a feature. I know that that's much more reliable. If you're an optimizer or a power gamer or you're min-maxing, then, you know, solid, I get a +4 for is much better than I get advantage. Because mathematically, you do not have to rely on a dice roll, whether it's a 20-sided dice roll or anything else. And 20-sided dice rolls, you know, there's too much variation going on. So I can see how that can be viewed as a better thing, because it definitely is. Okay, so what about the subclasses? Like, all of the subclasses are better than they were before, in my opinion. The Mercy, the Warrior of the Mercy, the Warrior of the Shadow, Warrior of Elements, the Elemental one, the Open Hand one, they're all much, much better. And I would say the Shadow is the strongest in combat, and it might well be more useful to you outside of combat because of how the Shadow works. But it's going to be more around stealth. It feels more like it's leaning more into the ninja narrative that we have in our head when we're playing a monk sometimes. So yeah, I can see a lot of people maybe just leaning into, I'll just do Shadow, and Open Hand, Elements, and Mercy may not get seen very much, just because it's picking up a little bit more. I mean, each one has their own sort of flavor to them, and yet there's some hard choices to make, I guess. I don't want to go necessarily through all the different features, because there was nothing in the subclass features that stood out for me when I was looking at them. Every single one of them sort of did what I kind of expected they would do. Mercy Monk does healing. I mean, you can also damage people, but that's what monks do. They punch you, they hurt you, right? So yeah, and that's fine. And then, you know, Shadow is really about sneaking around and dealing with darkness, and, you know, making sure that you can't be seen, that sort of thing. So, you know, I get it. You know, basically Shadow is leaning into the I'm going to become invisible, and then the Elements one leans more into using energy outside of slashing, piercing, and bludgeoning. And it partly does what you want that to do, but I think it does not, if you're looking for whatever you are hoping to get from the narrative of, say, Mortal Kombat, or the likes of Street Fighter or something like that. It kind of does that a little bit, but not quite. I don't think it quite falls into that. The Open Hand one's probably the weakest of all of them, and it's the least radical. Unfortunately, the Quivering Palm, we'll talk about that in a second. The Quivering Palm is not the way it was before. And yeah, we'll discuss this. So the monk feels really overstuffed with features. If we just look at the base class itself without looking at subclasses, particularly at low level, it's absolutely jam-packed with stuff. And the other thing I would have to say is, it's not just low level being packed, it's right across the levels. I also think it's hard to not do this with a monk. I found the same problem myself when I was trying to redesign the monk, is that it's very easy to wind up giving your monk way too many things that it can do, and too many decisions to make, and too many things that, you know, use up an action or a bonus action or a reaction or something like that, and how to dissect that so that you're not dealing with those problems. And what the heck to do with all of your points, you know, your key points in the past, now focus points. So, and it's sort of run into this problem where you could wind up with a martial class, which is probably, I would almost feel like the monk is probably the most complicated martial class out there now, potentially. The damage that a monk does as a martial class is way over the baseline. It's absolutely nuts. And that's just not even counting the subclass. If we start counting the subclass, particularly the Shadow, it's absolutely crazy just how much damage you're doing. Probably unnecessarily high. I mean, it would be smarter to sort of level out the, you know, lift the martials a little bit, but don't have one stand out amongst all of them. And the monk has gone from probably being one of the weaker martial classes to the strongest martial class, which is really strange. Still heavily relies on focus points or key points, which was what was called before. Too much of that going on, in my opinion. A lot of choices to make. Removing things like traps, setting traps, picking locks, climbing walls, is kind of, I mean, climbing walls is kind of achieved in the later part of the class by having and the ability to climb up and scale vertical surfaces. So that's kind of covered generally. Navigating in the dark, stealth as a skill, it's part of the monk ninja narrative. It's not completely captured in 2024, unless you're playing the Shadow Warrior. But even then, you're not covering some of those other aspects that we might have been looking for. Is like, we want to play a ninja-like character. We're not quite there. If you're playing like a Zen archer monk or martial artist, you can't really do that. There is certainly a narrative, a mythology, and it certainly did exist, but you can't really do that with the monk. It doesn't work very well. Drunken Master is not here. I know a lot of people were hoping they would see Drunken Master. Probably going to come up at some other point, but yeah, Drunken Master is not a thing. Healing, acupressure, acupuncture is partly realized by the Mercy Monk, but not in the way that I was expecting. It's a little bit odd. It does some of it, but it is still narratively odd and mechanically odd at times. I'm not saying that there's something wrong with the Mercy Monk. You know, if you like the idea of playing the Mercy Monk, great. But it's not going to capture all of the things you were looking for. Being able to challenge another martial artist or another monk, a master monk or a martial artist master of some kind, or grand master, it's not really connected into the narrative of this. This used to be part of AD&D, and it's not here now. I wish they had done that, but they didn't. Speaking with animals, plants, I never thought that it made sense that monks or martial artists would be able to communicate with animals and plants. I feel like that's more ranger or druid, something like that. But telepathy is definitely, the projecting yourself, telepathy, mind control, can't read your thoughts, can't control your mind. It's certainly a high-level fantasy for the monk or martial artist. Telepathy would have been a good thing, but they haven't got that. Instead, they've got a lot of combat features. Being able to appear dead was something that one of my players had suggested, and I playing possum, I didn't really quite understand. What they are trying to refer to is that, it's some martial artists, some monks can lower their heart rate to the point that they appear to be dead. They're not dead. And they wanted something like that to show that narrative at high level. And you can't really do that in this game. I don't know how you would write a mechanic or a feature for a tabletop role-playing game like that, honestly. That sounds like quite a hard job to do. There is no built-in magic item or magic sort of power for your character advancement now, as the old key empowerment strike is gone. I don't know that I like that very much, because it's hard to give a monk a magic weapon or a magic item that they will find useful. Because almost always you'll find that the most sensible thing to do is not to attack with a monk weapon. It is to attack with your fist, with your unarmed strikes, particularly at high level now. And it was always the case before too, is really. So yeah, I'm not sure I like the idea of that change. I don't see any. Now this is the thing that kind of pisses me off the most, and that is if you know anything about monk martial arts, kung fu, karate, but particularly kung fu and Asian martial arts, there is a heavy emphasis on animal fighting styles from Asia. And the monk doesn't have anything like that here. There's nothing like that sort of duplicates that concept where I can pick up praying mantis, or I could learn monkey or crane, or I could do tiger or leopard or whatever the heck it is. And there's a couple of them out there. I think they had an opportunity to do something like that if they'd taken some of the complexity out of other aspects of the monk, and that would have been a smarter idea. And that's not there, because monks don't need weapon mastery. I don't think that's, having the nick, vex, and those things are going to be a pain in the ass. But at least fighting styles, being able to pick up a fighting style that has something that does something for the monk, would have certainly appealed more to me. I don't know how the rest of you feel, but it's something that I think Pathfinder has done. the remastered version. And yeah, I would like to have seen something like that. There are no monk followers, so apparently as you become more of a more practiced martial artist and more legendary, nobody bothers following you. So it's all reliant on the game master to figure out how to do that rather than building it into the actual character advancement. Now, if you did that, you have to drop something else. Otherwise, as I said, it's already overstuffed the monk class advancement. You know, we count all of the basic stuff and then the subclasses. There's so much going on. The quivering palm idea is gone. Like in the past, it essentially meant you could do infinite damage. It has been around before in the past. I'm not honestly upset that quivering palm doesn't like do infinite damage and you can just punch a monster or a big bad and kill them with one blow. I'm not upset by that at all. I know in my own home group there are people who would be annoyed that it's not there because it used to exist in AD&D and they saw something like that, you know, as being a factor in the Unearthed Arcana, and like people were like, oh, I mean, it's an optimizer's wet dream, honestly. It's like being able to just hit once and kill the thing. Perfect. I would have, even if we had kept Quivering Palm, and, you know, Quivering Palm is kind of still there, and it's still part of the open hand, it needed to have limits of some kind. I think being able to, I think Jeremy Crawford, when he said, we didn't want to build a feature that did infinite damage. And I think that's probably right. Infinite damage doesn't mean you're doing damage physically. Damage is just code for you reduce hit points. And having a feature that can do infinite reduce hit points quite often results in a bad game. It might seem great at first, but it ultimately, the experience for everybody, apart from the person who does infinite damage, is bad for everybody else. And then later on, you will soon find that it's not as exciting to suddenly be able to do infinite damage. And I mean, of course, it's a high-level feature. Very few people get to that point when they're playing at that level of the game. Like level 17, heck, even my group who play from level 1 to 16 most of the time, or level 1 to 20, I've had one game that's gone from level 1 to 20. One game. And very few games we've ever had we've got to level 17. Usually we cut off at about 16. And I would be unusual. I would not be the norm. My group is not the normal group. The normal group usually don't get past level 5. So, or they start at level 3 and they're finished by level 6. So anyway, there's no monastery, there's no dojo, there's no sort of gym that the character gets as part of level advancement. I would have liked that. I want to become that sensei master and have that fantasy, and now it's now left to the game master, dungeon master, to make that a possibility. I would have liked to see mounts or vehicles, but more, I would say that's less of a thing for me, mounts and vehicles. But no astral projection really upset me quite a lot, because it's such a huge factor of the idea that the monk is in control of their mind and their spirit and their body. And the lack of astral projection, I suppose you could say, well, it'll probably show up in the warrior of the astral, whatever the heck it is. It'll be a subclass. But I think it should be intrinsic to the class itself as part of the baseline, but at a high level. Not at the top capstone, for sure. Invisibility is kind of gone unless you play a shadow warrior, and you can't turn into a dragon at your capstone. I thought this was a terrible idea, and one of my players had suggested it, and I said, dude, you've got to have limits on something like that. That is crazy. But the more and more I think about it, I'm like, yes, I can see that. The transformation of shape, like if you're controlling your mind, your body, and your spirit, your form is just what it currently is. It's very Mortal Kombat-like, isn't it? It certainly fills that narrative and that fantasy in many ways. So yes, yeah, that's kind of where my head was at with regard to the monk class. I am certainly not upset that they have at least improved things, because I'm not, because they have done a lot. They've clearly worked really, really hard. Yeah, for sure. So that's all I have to say on the monk. Thank you for watching and listening. Thank you to all my patrons who support me on Patreon so that I can spend plenty of my time trying to formulate my ideas around these sorts of things. And we'll be coming back with something else. I don't know. I think it'll be the Ranger next. Let's have a look at the Ranger next after the monk. That'll be next week. I think that'll be next week. Anyway, wherever you are in the world. And look, till next time, keep rolling those 20s. Okay, that's my monologue. I took much longer than an hour, I realised, okay? Let's go and have a look at chat. Let's see what you have to say. I will try to respond as best I can. Can I make it clear? The monk is a really good class now, okay? If you want a combat simulator, it's a really good class. It's a really good martial class, and it can sort of stand in line with even the spellcasters to a large degree. Just because it's got a couple of features that help sort of make the spellcasters work even better than they were before. But there's a lot going on here. And I honestly, I do think that as a martial class, the monk is definitely overpowered now. They've kind of gone too far the other way. A lot of people who like playing, martial classes won't care, and that's fine. But yeah, that's my opinion. Trust me, people, I do love the monk. Okay. Right. Thaco. No, we're not going back to Thaco. We're going to have tacos, though. Tacos are a good idea. Fred Huber's a patron. Thanks for being here, Fred. Derp. I was curious about this and look forward to hearing about it. Okay. I'm hoping I can transition to my group away from the game and won't have to run 5 or 6C D&D, though. Yeah, we had this discussion yesterday, didn't we, Derp? Derp's also a patron. And yeah, I share your sentiment that I would prefer to play Shadow Dark than Dungeons and Dragons 2024 or 6e. Just because there's too it feels like overload for a player and a game master to contend with. Monk was my first 5e character. Oh, okay, I liked the idea, but hated the reliance on very limited key points at low level. Well, I mean, even at high level, you're using a lot of key as well. Like, you know, they have tried to eliminate some of the lower level features, having to use key, so you can still do other stuff, which is a good idea. But then they've also got you can spend key to do something else. Hello, Negative Space. How you doing? The monk's 20th level is their head blows up because they overwhelmed by all of the abilities. Yeah, like I would be really interested to see how many players can play a level 20 monk without going insane. It might be a bit hard to do. I think I might struggle quite a lot. What do you got here, Derp? I make a proper quarterstaff. You need to hew a piece of hardwood into quarters, hence the name. Yeah, well, yes, but excuse me. Having been involved in the martial arts for a long time, you use what you have. We were taught to use a credit card if we needed to. We were used to use an umbrella. You know, we use an umbrella. We use a rake. We use whatever you have. Okay, you don't necessarily have the ability to just, you know, go and make a quarterstaff. And also, like a lot of the shaft, a lot of the the handles on shafts on older farming implements were much stronger than they are nowadays. It's not like you're going and buying something from a shop where it was made in a Chinese manufactured location. It's a very different thing. A lot of those things were made of hardwoods so that they were stronger. Don't let broomsticks be quarterstaffs due to this. Bruce Lee points. Yeah, we could call it Bruce Lee points rather than focus points. That's not a bad idea. Broomsticks are not very strong. You're talking about made in China. Like broomsticks. Broomsticks is one thing, okay? Broomsticks is a different thing. But, you know, if you're using a hoe handle, they're a lot stronger. They're made of harder woods. Things like that. Look, I have a quarterstaff in my house. I know how strong that thing is. They aren't pry bars. No, they're not. No, and even a quarterstaff is not a pry bar. Neo bending dodge. Neo's bending dodge. What are we talking about there? I'm not sure. The monk lives to fight. No, it's not the only thing. Hello, Mike. How Mike TW? It's not the only thing the monk does, though. I mean, there are so many other things that are part of the narrative for a monk, and this is all very much battle, 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 battle. They tested nothing. I suspect they didn't test very much of this at all, and if it was, it's very little testing going on. So Fred Huber, I suspect that's quite true. Then there was one D&D 4. One D&D 4. I don't know what that means, Mike. I don't know that. I don't think. I don't believe that Crawford ignores all feedback. I don't think that's the case at all. Okay. I think you've got to remember that your design team for Wizards of the Coast are very much influenced by the marketing team, and they'll be giving all sorts of instructions to the design team. So it's a bit hard to make something when you're dealing with all this input from somebody else. Palladium did martial arts as a lot better than D&D. Hello, Pale Rider. How you doing? Ninjas and Super Spies. Books is good. Okay. All right. They boosted the monk because 2014 monks sucked. I don't think it... I mean, I played monk and I saw people play a monk. I saw a monk played from level 1 to level 20. And he is the only level 20 character who died in that campaign. And it was because he threw himself into the most ridiculous situations where other people who were playing fighters and other types of classes, paladins and so forth, would never do that. So when he died, it was reasonable for him to die. But he did so much stuff. It was just unbelievable what a monk could do. Could he do more damage than anybody else? It didn't matter. It really didn't matter. I don't believe in Drunken Master. Okay, well, that's fine. It's a wino. You reckon a Drunken Master's a wino? Not a symbol of power. Yeah, because when people play a monk, often the fantasy is I'm playing Jackie Chan, China O'Brien, Jet Li, Bruce Lee, who else is Van Damme, I suppose, to a certain degree, Chuck Norris, that sort of thing. I want to encourage players to seek the PC. Look, the stronghold thing, I still think it was smart to include a stronghold feature to character advancement. That's just my opinion. Ascending at level 21 to Lung Dragon and no longer care about mortals. Okay. Yeah, I thought I was not completely out of my tree today. I knew I was going to take a bit longer because it's a monk. I can't help myself. I'm describing the quarterstaff as a stick. Okay, it's a reinforced stick made out of strong. We were getting caught up into the wrong sort of issues. I hate to say it, people, but I did get to 3rd Dan black belt, so I am aware of what's going on here. But you're getting way too serious about the quarterstaff stuff. Anyway. I'd still prefer a baseball bat to a quarterstaff, frankly. But that's me. Anyway, I'm going to get out of here because I've run out of time. Do you like the new monk for Dungeons & Dragons 2024? Undecided, 50%. Okay, all right. That's out of 10 votes. Yes, 20%. Just watching, 20%. And no, 10%. Interesting. I expected people to be a little bit more happy. I guess, part of the problem, I guess, for designers is sometimes just giving you lots of more powerful and cooler stuff that's combat related is not enough to drive your audience towards that narrative and that fantasy. And you have to capture the fantasy of the class that people are trying to get. And this is probably where they may strike some weird problems, where they don't understand why people aren't necessarily completely over the moon about the monk. because part of the narrative is not there. And that absolutely exists in the 2024 monk. There is a large chunk of the narrative that doesn't exist. Or you have to take a very specific subclass and lose out on something else. So yes, maybe if they had looked at, trimming down some of the combat features a little bit and making them less part of the class, that would have worked, and focusing less on, I think they've focused too much on focus points, flurry of blows, far too much on patient defense and step of the wind and your deflect attacks thing. There's way too much focus on those things, and we could still have them, but just not keep following that level all the time. Like, yeah, have them, but not keep going back to them each time at higher level. The proper range is 60 feet. Further is showing off. I don't know what that means. Thanks, Fred. Okay, I have no idea what we're talking about here. Anyway, I need to get going. I am supposed to be somewhere else. I will see you all in a few days. And I'll probably be on Discord tomorrow. We'll see how we go, see how I feel. More than likely I will be there, probably doing some editing. Anyway, thank you for hanging out with me. I appreciate all of you who've been watching and listening. Thank you for taking part in the poll. Thank you to everybody in chat who've been chatting away and presenting their ideas. Fred Huber, Derp, Mike, I really do appreciate you jumping in, at least saying something. Negative Space as well. It's nice to see what people have to say. And Matt, can't forget Matt. So thank you for hanging out and giving your feedback and at least making me laugh a little bit too. Thank you to all my patrons who support me on Patreon. And look, wherever you are in the world, whether it be the morning or the afternoon or the night, please look after yourself, your family, and your friends. Be nice to your neighbours. And hey, till next time, keep rolling those 20s.